Hi, everybody. Welcome to Christian Homestead. My name is Jared. I got an email from Emily Johnson. Subject line: Mega Large Missouri Temple? Question mark, question mark. And this email is really interesting. In my opinion, there's different misconceptions here that Emily is writing about. And so I want to clarify those. And I do want to put the offer out there. If you have questions about the second coming, millennium, church doctrine, feel free to let me know what those questions are. Send me an email. I can't guarantee I'll respond to everybody, of course. I mean, you can see here that I have six. I have 6,460 emails in my inbox. I can't get to them all. But if you have questions, I don't mind going back and covering things that I already have before, because I realize there's always people joining the channel, subscribing, and even if you've been watching for a long time, you probably haven't seen every single one of my videos because I have thousands of videos at this point. So if that's something that you'd like to do, if you have questions, then send them in, and then I may just make a video about it and revisit stuff that we've talked about before. So before we dive into the email, just a quick reminder, I'm doing a third call for content creators in these two categories. One, this would be female only for this first category. New, meaning a brand new account that has not already existed for a few months or weeks or years. New YouTube channels that primarily focus on these categories. Okay. So like defending the church when it comes to the family, talking about temple garments and the proper way to um, approach that topic, and, feminism, birth rates, like defending the church. Essentially, that's what I'm looking for. People that want to defend the church on these issues. Um, I'm not saying I'm not doing a call out for energy healing channels. I'm asking for women that will speak out against energy healing, because the church has counseled against that, and especially with that issue, it's kind of mostly um, a female issue for some reason. So, and then I'm not looking for older accounts that are already established, and I'm not looking to promote these at this time. But if you feel prompted, go ahead and do it. But my offer is to promote you if you have a brand new channel and your channel is doing well, and if you primarily focus on these issues. The second category is if you start a new channel and you're outside the United States. And it would need to be for a English speaking audience, because if I'm going to promote you, my audience is English speaking. So if you're from the UK, Ireland, South Africa, or some other African nation, Australia, New Zealand, or anywhere where you speak English and you're outside the United States, I would like to promote those kind of channels. This is not a guarantee. It's just if I feel like your channel is going to do well and it seems like you're committed, then I may promote you. Okay, so back to the email. Hey, Jared, I'm in a Second Coming Facebook forum and came across a question on there about temples and replied. Someone else, not the OP, which I don't know what that is, original person, original prankster. Sorry, I'm a child of the late 90s. That's when I was going to high school. Some of you get that and some of you don't. Original prankster. Replied to me, and I'd never heard of some of what that person said. Here's the convo. And then I, redacted the names for privacy. I'm not trying to attack anybody or humiliate anybody. So person number one said, I spent most of last night thinking about the choice to not announce any new temples. My theory is that there is a window where new temples could be announced and completed before all heck breaks loose and the window has passed. The church doesn't want to waste resources on new temples that can't be completed. I highlight this because the assumption here, and I don't know this person's complete thoughts on this, but it seems like they're assuming that there's going to be a period of time between now and the second coming where things are going to be so chaotic, economically, politically, geopolitically, maybe World War III or something that where we're not going to be able to build temples. I do not hold that point of view. That's more of the, the other schools of thought that I don't really agree with. Usually it's the schools of thought that accept some of those false prophecies that we have verified are false or unverified, that usually paint a very, very bleak picture where you're going to have to make your way to Jackson County on foot, make sure that you have your generators, make sure that you have your supplies, hand carts, whatever, because we're going back to the 1800s. And so I think that's where this person is coming from. I could be wrong. Okay. And then Emily said, is it said though that there won't continue to be, or sorry, is it said though that there won't continue to have a need to build temples after the millennium starts? It's my understanding that during the millennium is where the greatest amount of missionary work will be done. Surely we will need to continue to build as many temples as possible to sustain the growing number of converts. So let's stop here and address this question about, are they going to continue? Are we going to continue to build temples in the millennium? Is there going to be a need for temple work? And I think most of us already know, but let's go to Journal of Discourses, volume 15. It starts on page 138, column B. So this is President Brigham Young. He says, I'm going to stop my talking by saying that in the millennium, when the kingdom of God is established on the earth in power, glory, and perfection, and the reign of wickedness that has so long prevailed is subdued, the saints of God will have the privilege of building their temples. So temples, plural, because that comes into play later, and of entering into them, becoming, as it were, pillars in the temples of God, and they will officiate for their dead. Then we will see our friends come up, and perhaps some we have been acquainted with here. If we ask who will stand at the head of the resurrection in this last dispensation, the answer is Joseph Smith Jr., the prophet of God. He is the man who will be resurrected and receive the keys of the resurrection, and he will seal this authority upon others, and they will hunt up their friends and resurrect them when they shall have been officiated for, and bring them up. And we will have revelations to know our forefathers clear back to Father Adam and Mother Eve, and we will enter into the temples, plural, of God and officiate for them. Then man will be sealed to man until the chain is made perfect back to Adam, so that there will be a perfect chain of priesthood from Adam to the winding up scene. This will be the work of the Latter-day Saints in the millennium. So there are going to be temples, plural, and there are going to be new temples that are built in the millennium, according to this statement. And one of the primary things that we're going to be doing during the millennium is temple work, along with missionary work too. I'm not going to read these quotes right now, but we've learned that, especially at the beginning of the millennium, there's going to be a great need for missionary work. And that's going to be the primary time of doing missionary work. Everything that we're doing right now in the lead up to the millennium is just getting things ready for that main event. I should have pulled that up, but we've covered it before. And then I decided to put this, to create a new row on my spreadsheet called Quotes, Common Misconceptions. So this is currently row 18. The topic is Millennium, the misconception. No more temples will be built in the millennium, / there will only be one giant temple. And we're going to talk about that in a second, because there's somebody that seems to suggest that that's going to be the case. Okay, so person number 2 says, Emily Johnson, the temple work during the millennium has to be done mostly by a terrestrial being, which is a being that has been changed in the twinkling of an eye from mortal to an immortal. Okay, so when you read the rest of what this person says, I think I know where they're getting some of this information, and I think they're getting some stuff kind of turned around and messed up. So, okay, well, let me just pull up the quotes that I have for this. Okay, so this person says that a terrestrial being, which is a being that has been changed in the twinkling of an eye from mortal to an immortal. So when we're talking about mortals and immortals, we're talking about people that are still in this life, in a probationary state. They're still in mortality. They have not yet gone on to be resurrected. Once you're resurrected, that's when you're considered immortal. That's typically the case. I have a quote that we're about to read that talks about that fact. So, if this person is talking about resurrected beings, like terrestrial resurrected beings, uh, doing temple work, well, first we need to look at this. This is on my spreadsheet called Quotes A through Z, Resurrection, Performing Ordinances During the Millennium. This is from President Joseph Fielding Smith in Doctrines of Salvation. This section is called Only Mortals Can Perform Temple Ordinances. Will resurrected beings during the millennium actually take part in the endowment work of the temple along with mortal beings? And this is something that a lot of people don't seem to understand, because whenever we've talked about the number of temples and the amount of work that needs to be done with this like big influx of people that are going to join the church at the beginning of the millennium, a lot of people will say, well, we're going to have all the resurrected beings that are going to also work in the temples with us. And so we're going to have plenty of manpower. But President Joseph Fielding Smith says the answer to this question is no. That is, they will not assist in performing the ordinances. Resurrected beings will assist in furnishing information, which is not otherwise available. And that's actually pretty much what Brigham Young said. He said it not only in that quote that we read, but I also have, I think, another one or two where he says that they're going to bring those records that we couldn't possibly get ourselves, because there is no record on Earth of certain people. They have like their own record keeping system. So resurrected beings will assist in furnishing information which is not otherwise available, but mortals will have to do the ordinance work in the temples. Baptism, confirmation, ordination, endowment, and sealings all pertain to this mortal life, and are ordinances required of those who are in mortality. Provision has been made for these ordinances to be performed vicariously for those who are worthy, but who died without the opportunity in this life of receiving these ordinances in person. You can readily see that it would be inconsistent for a resurrected being to come and be baptized for the dead. The resurrected person has passed to another sphere where the laws and blessings do not pertain to this mortal life. This is equally true of every other ordinance. If it were permissible for resurrected persons to come back and do work in the temples, then there would be no reason for us in this mortal life to act vicariously for them, for they would do it for themselves. So we have that. Now, let's go to another spreadsheet. This is called Quotes, Quicken, Transfiguration, Translation. A while ago, I was trying to get to the bottom of what do all these different terms mean? Because sometimes people think that some of these terms are just completely distinct from each other. Each one has its own definition, and it causes a lot of confusion. And so I put all the ones that I could think of here, all the different phrases like caught away, caught up, changed, quicken, taken up, transfiguration, translation, twinkling of an eye, to see if I could sort it out. This quote, I think, sums it up the best out of all of them. This is from Elder Bruce R. McConkie of the Quorum of the 12 Apostles in his book called The Millennial Messiah. And he's talking about the millennium at this part. Some mortals have been translated. In this state, they are not subject to sorrow. Actually, you know what? Hold on. No, sorry. I'm going to skip down. You can read this first paragraph, though. Just pause and read that if you want. Okay. During the millennium, there will, of course, be two kinds of people on earth. Okay? There will be two kinds. There will be those who are mortal and those who are immortal. There will be those who have been changed or quickened or transfigured or translated. Words fail to describe their state. And this is basically saying these words all mean the same thing. And those who have gone through a second change in the twinkling of an eye, so as to become eternal in nature. Okay, so you understand what it's saying? It's saying that if you're still in mortality, if you haven't been destroyed along with the wicked when Christ comes, and you're still in mortality, you have not died yet, your body is going to be changed, quickened, transfigured, translated, whatever. Just choose whatever term you want. And then there are going to be those who have already been resurrected, and they are going to be here. Okay. Continuing. There will be those who are on probation, for whom earth is a probationary estate, and who are thus working out their salvation. And those who have already overcome the world and have entered into a fullness of eternal joy. There will be those who will yet die in the sense of being changed from their quickened state to a state of immortality, and those who, having previously died, are then living in a resurrected state. There will be those who are subject to, well, okay, I'm just going to end it there. Okay, so when the millennium starts, your body is going to be changed. You're going to be quickened, translated, whatever. There's kind of a description of what that's like here in this first paragraph. Once we're already in the millennium, everyone who is alive in probation, and they're in a quickened, translated, transfigured state, etc., this is what's going to happen at that point. This is from President Joseph Fielding Smith. In that day, there will be no death until men are old. Children will not die, but will live to the age of a tree. Isaiah says this is 100 years. When the time comes for men to die, they'll be changed in the twinkling of an eye, and there will be no graves. So if we go back to the email, the twinkling of an eye refers to going from mortality in a quickened state to immortality, or being resurrected in an immortal state. Immortal, resurrected beings are not going to be doing any temple work. And you're going to be resurrected according to whatever kingdom of glory you're worthy of. So you definitely wouldn't have terrestrial beings doing anything of that sort, but resurrected people are not going to participate in actual ordinances in the temple. Although, where this person may be confused is that right now the earth is in a telestial condition, not a telestial glory, because the glory comes for everybody after this earth is completely over with and everybody is resurrected to one of the three kingdoms of glory, and then you're in a kingdom of glory. But this earth started out in a terrestrial condition when Adam and Eve were first placed here. It was a paradisiacal world and everything was terrestrial in its condition. And then there was the fall and we went down to a telestial condition. Then it's going to return to a terrestrial condition. And so, yes, mortals who are quickened, changed, transfigured, whatever, in a terrestrial condition will be doing the work in the temples. Resurrected people will not. I actually think I have. If I'm not mistaken, I actually made a. You might need to see this. I think I made a thing for this one time. Yeah, Millennium people. Okay. So here's the different possibilities before the Millennium. Most everybody is in this state right here, not translated. There are some people who have been translated, like the three Nephites, but this is not the norm right now before the Millennium. And then we do know that there have been some people that have been resurrected, starting with Christ. During the Millennium, everybody that's in mortality is going to be in a translated or changed or quickened or transfigured state. And then you'll also have those that have been resurrected. And there's going to be more of those because that's going to bring in the morning of the first resurrection. And later in the millennium, there's going to be the second resurrection. And then at the very end, for those that inherit the celestial kingdom, and then after that, the sons of perdition, they will finally be resurrected. And so I have that represented here after the millennium. And then after the final judgment, we're all done. Everybody's done with mortality. Everybody's going to be resurrected and inherit one of these three degrees of glory, except for the very, very, very few who are sons of perdition. But all at that point are immortal. So hopefully that's clear. Okay. So going back to the email. They will be in the temple day and night, doing as much work as possible to be able to give as many people as possible to be resurrected in the morning, the first resurrection, beginning with the Savior's return. How long is the morning of the first resurrection? The millennium is 1 day of the Lord's time, is 1/3 of the day, 8 hours morning from sunrise to sunset, or 334-ish years of the millennium. Or will it be even shorter? When does the afternoon start? I mean, these are all things I don't think that we can really know. I'm not really big into like these kind of calculations, really. Hopefully, many of us faithful members will have the same desires of our hearts granted to us the same way previous translated beings desired, to bring as many of our brothers and sisters into the gospel before we are resurrected. And that work has to be done in temples. The only time available to do the billions of saving ordinances for the majority of those who have died is during the millennium, if indeed the time for the Savior's return is very soon. Perhaps there will be a few mortals still alive that are worthy to go to the temple, but that would soon come to an end, and they will die or have to be twinkled in order to remain on the earth. So we covered that. Everyone. Okay. Like, yeah, we're going to go through a depopulation event. The wicked are going to be destroyed. We don't know how many that is. I would think at least 1 billion, but I wouldn't be surprised if it's more. But everybody that remains, if you're living a celestial law currently or a terrestrial law, you'll remain on the earth. You'll still be in mortality, but you'll be changed, quickened, translated, transfigured. So it's not going to be a few mortals that are alive. It's still going to be a lot of people, and the earth is going to be repopulated. It's going to be replenished. And actually, I think that the population is probably going to get really big because we're not going to have the same barriers that we do right now. A lot of the evil things that are done right now, killing and murder and all the things that take away human life, substances that people consume and whatever. I think the millennium is going to be a time of, just a lot of people, a large population, because all these barriers and dangers are going to be removed. And then we just read, everyone's going to live to be 100 years old. So there's not going to be premature deaths. Okay, continuing. Just a good reason to build as many temples as possible now instead of waiting to build them in the millennium. One last tidbit. How large will the temple be that comes down from heaven? If Nauvoo is the cornerstone and the center stake of Zion is independence, and the two temples will be joined together, the one on earth and the one from heaven, they will occupy a large space. 24 temples were planned to be built just in that area back in Joseph Smith's time in 2 city blocks, about 1,300 acres. Thoughts? Okay, so I think this person is referring to this idea. When people read the book of Revelation, specifically chapter 21, and when they read it literally, uh, they come up with the idea that there's going to be a gigantic cube that's going to come and join itself to the earth, and that this is going to be the city of New Jerusalem. I do not hold this view because for many reasons, even before going to an explanation from the church or anybody in authority, it doesn't really make sense to me that we would build all these temples and then they would be crushed by a gigantic cube. Of course, you could say, well, maybe, there'd be some kind of supernatural thing where they're, transported to inside the cube or something like that. But also I feel like there's just common sense. It doesn't really make sense that there'd be a gigantic cube on Earth. Uh, I mean, is this what celestial planets look like? Because the Earth is going to be celestialized, and if you were to go to Kolob or some other planet that became a celestial world, do they all have gigantic cubes on them? I don't know, but the reason why I really don't believe in this whole thing here is when you go to the Institute student manual for uh, the book of Revelation, this is chapter 56, and you come down here for chapter 21, and for these verses, let's read what it says. So this section is called The Holy City, New Jerusalem. And I think this is what a lot of people picture right here, just a gigantic thing. John saw in vision, sorry, let me zoom in. John saw in vision the holy city, New Jerusalem, coming down to earth, symbolizing God's presence among his people. The city was depicted as an enormous cube, which recalls the Holy of Holies in Solomon's temple. Which, of course, the Holy of Holies, that's the presence of God. That's what that represents. Also representative of God's dwelling place. The symbolic elements, and notice how many times I highlight the word symbolic, symbolizing, symbols. The symbolic elements John saw that compose the city, clear glass, precious stones, pearls, and gold, share the traits of reflecting light, resisting decaying or tarnishing, and symbolizing purity, beauty, and refinement. The walls of the city were made with all manner of precious stones. Precious stones often represent the Lord's followers who have been refined and made holy. The gates of the city were made of pearls and the streets of gold. Both pearls and gold can be seen as symbols of refinement. Oysters produce pearls through pain and adversity. The gold requires fire to burn out impurities. The exalted will likewise have been refined through adversity. And I should highlight that. Exalted. I'll explain why in just a minute. There is no need of temples in the holy city because all of the celestial kingdom will be as a temple. God himself and Jesus Christ dwell there. So here's the thing that I think confuses a lot of people. They read this and think that this has something to do with the beginning of the millennium. You have the New Jerusalem coming down out of heaven, and there is going to be Zion, the city of Enoch, coming from down out of heaven at the beginning of the millennium. And I think all it is, in my opinion, is just the people of the city of Zion, Enoch, his city, as well as all the resurrected saints. I don't tend to think it's going to be a huge chunk of land that's going to land on top of Missouri. But you do have that. But then there's also this other time, a second time, that New Jerusalem comes down, or the holy city. We read about it at the end of the book of Revelation, and we need to pay attention to the study guides and study helps. So in the chapter heading, it says, "Those who overcome will be sons of God. The earth attains its celestial glory." That's something that happens after the millennium. So we go through the 1,000 years. The earth is in a terrestrial, paradisiacal condition. And then there's a short window of time afterwards where you have the final war of Gog and Magog, like a final battle and struggle in a time of wickedness, but it's short. And then after that, it's all done for this earth. All of God's children that are being sent to this planet, it's done, and this world becomes a celestial world. Okay, that's what we're talking about here. It says, "And I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth were passed away, and there was no more sea." When you click on the footnote for new, it says celestial glory. So that makes sense, right? Being in the presence of God, because at that point, when the entire planet is celestial, there's not going to be a need for temples at that point. The entire planet is going to be a temple and will be in God's presence. So let's read this again. "There is no need of temples in the holy city, because all of the celestial kingdom will be as a temple. God himself and Jesus Christ dwell there. There is no need of the sun there, for the Lamb is the light thereof." John saw that a central feature of the holy city was the tree of life, representative of the healing and eternal life found in the celestial kingdom. The tree of life in the Garden of Eden was guarded by cherubim after the fall. But those who dwell in the holy city have been redeemed from the fall, and all there are free to partake of the ever-bearing tree of life in the celestial kingdom. Okay. Now, we should also talk about the New Jerusalem, because that was touched upon in the email. So this was the plan for the city of Zion. And as far as I know, it still is the plan. Why do I think that? Well, because in the late 1960s, under the presidency of David O. McKay, the Independence Visitor Center was constructed. And let's read a little bit about that. This is from the David O. McKay Diaries. You can find this on the University of Virginia's website for Mormon studies. Just click on Missouri. And this is from Friday, March 10th, 1967. "Report of meeting with President David O. McKay on March 10th, 1967 at his Hotel Utah apartment office." By the way, that's now the Joseph Smith Memorial Building. Prepared by Alvin R. Dyer. Let's see. Okay. "The purpose of the meeting was to report to the president on an assignment given to me to give consideration to the erecting of a Bureau of Information, otherwise known as the Independence Visitor Center, on the temple land property owned by the church at Independence, Missouri. I explained to the president that the prophet Joseph Smith in the early days sent a Plat plan of the city of Zion, New Jerusalem, which included the temple complex from Kirtland, Ohio to the Brethren in Jackson County, Missouri. This plan was prepared in the prophet's own hand, and that the original was in the church historian's office. Conjointly with Brother Fetzer," so that's Emil Fetzer, like an architect for the church, "we reported to the president that our study in this direction was to undertake, if we could, to ascertain which of the temple buildings designated would presumably be located on that part of the temple land that the church owned." So he's talking about this. They want to build the visitor center. Which of these buildings would the visitor center later become? Because it's a visitor center now. Later on, it's going to be one of these temples. Okay, going back. Okay, this we had arrived at and had determined which of these locations would be concentrated upon for the erection of a building for the purpose intended. The temple buildings except the temple where the Lord will officially appear, as spoken of in the Revelations, are represented on the prophet's plan as houses, buildings, or temples of certain orders of the priesthood. This part, by the way, is a little bit enigmatic for me. The temple buildings except the temple where the Lord will officially appear. And then he goes on to say there will be 25 buildings in all, occupying about 35 acres. So I don't want to go off on too much of a tangent, but you have the 24 temples, and he's saying that there's supposed to be a 25th where the Lord will appear. So if that's the case, I'm not sure that the temple lot is the actual temple where he would appear. But where is the 25th temple? Well, I've done videos about it. I still don't really know. But, all right, continuing. The hope of all this is to be as realistic as possible in the erection of a building, the basic structure of which could be used at a future date as part of the temple complex, but also to be designed and erected now as a Bureau of Information. Brother Fetzer identified on the overlay sheet the particular building location which we proposed to use, which someday perchance could be a part of the overall complex. Brother Garf stated to the president that as he understood it, our proposal now was for one building properly situated on our temple land, which would be used for a Bureau of Information, that no other structure or any part of the temple complex is presumed. President McKay was very intent as he listened to the presentation, asking a number of questions concerning the size and facility of the structure being discussed. In answer to these questions, Brother Fetzer presented to the president several schematic drawings of floor plans, elevation perspective, access roads, parking areas, etc. These drawings indicated that the proposed structure would be 2 stories high with a floor area dimension of 61 feet by 87 feet, which dimension is the same as revealed to the prophet Joseph as the size of the complex buildings. So the idea here, where he's like, well, originally there was going to be a 24 temple complex, but we're going to have this large, well, he doesn't say cube, but I think he's talking about the cube. But we're going to have this gigantic cube come down out of heaven. That's what's actually going to happen. I don't think so. Otherwise, in the 1960s, and actually I think it was dedicated in the early 70s, they wouldn't have come up with this plan. So I think that this is still the plan. The only thing I don't know is what are they talking about with the 25th temple. I do have a couple of things here. There's also talk of 12 temples. So like you have, this is Elder Wilford Woodruff. You can find this on the Wilford Woodruff Papers website, journal, August 24th, 1867, page 92. President Young said his views of the Great Temple in Jackson County, Missouri, was that there would be 12 temples surrounding a square, and the square would be, and then illegible, for a great tabernacle for the people, while the temples would be for giving endowments, and there would be doors out of every temple for the priesthood who labored in the temples to go into the tabernacle to teach the people and prepare them for the endowments. So I don't know. I don't know that President David O. McKay really took that into consideration. I don't know if that's something that was supposed to be. And then we have this from President Joseph Fielding Smith. This is Doctrines of Salvation. Offering of the sons of Levi. What kind of offering will the sons of Levi make to fulfill the words of Malachi and John? Logically, such a sacrifice as they were authorized to make in the days of their former ministry when they were first called. Will such a sacrifice be offered in the temple? Evidently, not in any temple, as they are constructed for work of salvation and exaltation today. It should be remembered that the great temple, which is yet to be built in the city of Zion, will not be one edifice, but 12. Some of these temples will be for the lesser priesthood. Right. These temples to the east, these belong to the Aaronic priesthood. Deacons right here, teachers, priests, and bishops. When these temples are built, it is very likely that provision will be made for some ceremonies and ordinances which may be performed by the Aaronic priesthood, and a place provided where the sons of Levi may offer their offering in righteousness. I'm not going to read the rest of this. You can pause and read this if you need more clarification. Joseph Smith talked about this. It's not just Joseph Fielding Smith, but Joseph Smith himself, about the resumption of burnt sacrifices. In a nutshell, a lot of people assume that it only belonged to the law of Moses, and that was, a primary feature, but it also existed before the law of Moses, going all the way back to Adam, just like baptism and faith and all that stuff. And so in the restitution of all things, what is said here is that that has to be restored, at least for a time, in that it would happen here. So, that's all I really know. Was there one more? No, that was pretty much it. So I'd have to say, yes, temples are going to continue to be built in the millennium. I don't think that they stop building temples because all heck is going to break loose. I think that temples are going to be built all the way up until the millennium and then all the way through the millennium. As far as I can tell, the plan for New Jerusalem is still in force, and that's why they did what they did in the 60s. I fully expect to see this, but the thing that I don't know is, I don't really know anything about that 25th temple. And I think that pretty much covers it. You're going to have mortals and immortals. Those that are mortal are going to be changed, quickened, translated, whatever. Everyone's going to be in a terrestrial condition at that point, including animals and the planet itself. But then you're going to have those that have been resurrected, and the only thing that they're going to do when it comes to temple work is provide names of people that don't have records that exist anymore in mortality, but they know who they are on the other side of the veil. So I hope that answers all your questions. Thanks for the email, Emily. I'll talk to you guys later.